we'll ask everybody to take their seats. So we are ready for our next speaker. So our next speaker is Dr. Emily Tetzlaff, and her presentation is titled Advancements and Challenges in Fatigue Risk Management in the Mining Industry, a critical review of best practices, barriers, and policy insights. So Dr. Tetzlaff is a recent graduate of the PhD program in human kinetics from the University of Ottawa. Throughout her doctorate, she served as a research affiliate with the Climate Change and Innovation Bureau at Health Canada and worked as a fatigue risk management analyst for Torex Gold Resources. Emily currently holds the position of Principal Scientist, EHS, at Wenco International Mining Systems. Let's all give a round of applause for Emily.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I've been able to speak at WSN a few times over the past few years about my master's research, my PhD work, and it's often talked about heat stress and circulated around that type of physiology, but I have a bit of a transition right now with the direction I'm heading for my research, and that's all about fatigue. I'm so excited to be here today to share that with you guys. And as the introduction said, I had been working with Torex Gold for the last couple of years, running their fatigue risk management system. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today stems from the work that I was doing with them as an independent researcher and kinesiologist, and then a little bit about the new work that I'm doing with Wenco International Mining Systems. Now, the review that we're doing today is going to touch on different technologies and systems that exist inside the industry, but I'm going to do it agnostic. It's not going to have any brand names in it. There's over 40 different companies now that have technologies in this space. We're not going to use those names today. We're just going to talk about them based on the orientation of the technology itself. So a little bit just about what is fatigue, what type of fatigue are we talking about, what is the relationship to the workplace, specifically to mining, what do we do for fatigue risk management as a system that's embedded inside the structure of our safety system, how do we identify it through a series of various processes? And then how do we monitor it using some of these technologies? And then at the end, we're going to kind of circle back of what are some of the challenges and considerations that we need to make if we're considering adopting one of these technologies, implementing it. Maybe your company already has one, and this can help you think a little bit more critically about how it's used or could be better integrated inside the larger system. Okay, so for just getting us on the same page of what type of fatigue we're talking about, because there's a couple different types. We can have physical fatigue, that's our muscles, it's our bodies, it's fully feeling it. What we're going to talk about today is that mental fatigue. It's the cognitive fatigue that's existing inside of our brain. And really this means that we're in some type of state of mental exhaustion, and it's impairing our cognitive functioning. There is a third type of this that's related to the mental fatigue, and that is chronic fatigue. And so that's a medically diagnosed symptom or condition that's a little bit different. So that's often related to other chronic diseases that a worker might be experiencing. So staying in the space of just the cognitive fatigue that's happening over the course of a workday. And so what is happening when somebody is at work and they are becoming fatigued? So at the top of the slide here, we have a little bit of a continuum, and this is our continuum of consciousness. At one end of it, we are fully alert, which hopefully we all are right now, and we've got really fast, rapid beta waves that are going through as electrical impulses in the neurons in our brain. This means we're alert, we're functioning, we're able to cognitively be aware of our environment, adapt to it as necessary. We then have alpha waves. This is a slight slowing of the brain waves. This means that I am starting to become very slow in my thinking. I'm not fully asleep yet. I might be at risk of an eyes open microsleep or even an eyes closed microsleep taking place, but we have that slowing of the consciousness. It could also be kind of your flow state when it's your hobby that you're really good at, really passionate, and your mind can kind of wander while you're doing it. This is that state here. Then we go to theta. We're getting really slow here. We've had a full microsleep take place, or we're actually entering into a full state of sleep. And then, of course, at the far end of our stream of consciousness here, we have being asleep. And our deepest form of sleep is delta waves. These are really slow. It's the really restorative, powerful part of your night. So where do we want our workers? We want all of us to be in that beta wave period, right? We want high level of functioning. We want to be alert. Mind environments are extremely dynamic. We need to have that level of consciousness there for us. If we're alert, we can understand the distractions around us. We can decrease those incidents. We have less human error events take place. We're significantly more efficient in our performance, so we've got productivity benefits. If we're a mobile equipment operator, we've got better fuel consumption, better braking patterns. We're also going to be situationally aware, so we're not going to hit something on the road. We can avoid hazards, have better spotting times, and as well, we're remaining conscious of our own body and our own level of fatigue. The more fatigued we become, the less aware we are to be able to identify that in ourselves. So that's where we have to rely on others around us for that component of it. So fatigue is an experience that is a hazard in every single occupation, whether this is an office job, construction, agriculture, it doesn't matter. Everything on the left-hand side of the screen here is what every workplace is having to deal with for factors that could lead to fatigue. So disorders and conditions, sleep apnea, insomnia, these are experiences that anybody can have. Certain types of medications, so benzos, antipsychotics, opioids, something as simple as your antihistamine can make you more susceptible to fatigue. We also have infections, we've got different heart and lung conditions, mental health conditions like depression and anxiety can make us more susceptible, and then autoimmune disorders like type 1 diabetes and arthritis. But specific to the mining industry, we take all of that and we layer on top of it because we've got some additional considerations here. We've got labor-intensive tasks that are leading to that physical fatigue, and that can have a weight on our mental fatigue. We've got long working hours. We're starting with early morning awakenings. We've got potentially long commute times depending on the level of remoteness of your site. Shift work, of course, is having a factor here. Loud noises, hot temperatures, all of this is creating an environment that has an additional layer of fatigue potential. So what do we do about that? What we do about it is we have what's called a fatigue risk management system. These are not new. The history of these dates all the way back to the Industrial Revolution. We're talking the 1760s. And really, at this point in time is when we decided that we need to have a prescriptive or a regulatory look or stance on this that says that we shouldn't have to work X number of hours of unbroken work. This is where we started to get breaks, lunch hours, and having an end day to our work. Second half of the 20th century, around the 1950s, we started to change our understanding a little bit because of sleep science advancements. We started to understand that we have a circadian rhythm. We started to understand that we have other causes of fatigue, like we just went over. So that built our understanding as well of the role that that could play with human error. Now, in the 21st century, around the year 2000, the next advancement wave happened with fatigue risk management, and that was with the integration of detection technologies, and also on top of that, understanding that there's organizational and operational differences, as well as intra-individual differences. So between that worker themselves and between that worker themselves on each given day, knowing that this can change based on your experiences at home that night and what you're bringing into the workplace with you. So within fatigue risk management, there's two types. We've got that prescriptive stuff, which we all have. It's the Employment Standards Act that says we can only work X number of hours without a break. That's never going to go away, nor should it. That regulatory part is needed. But what we also really need is this performance-based approach as well that allows us to have non-regulatory components of it that tailor it to the workplace and tailor it to the worker. So there's tons of different layers of this, but identifying, monitoring, mitigating, and communicating are four kind of pillars that we have within that performance-based approach. So today we're going to focus in on two of them, the identifying and the monitoring. So identifying, this is actually just looking for the signs of that fatigue exists in your workplace, what workers is it affecting more, and then how can we better monitor it on an individual or site-wide scale to be able to then apply necessary controls to address it. So for fatigue identification, we've got three parts. We've got predictive processes, proactive processes, and reactive processes. So predictive, this is where we're using things like previous experience. You've got a wealth of knowledge within the control room, within dispatchers, within supervisors that know intricacies of what might work for their crew. That is extremely valuable when we look at crew management. We also have evidence-based scheduling practices. So this is just knowing that right now, most of you are probably feeling a little bit of fatigue or sleepiness because we're in one of the windows around 2 to 3 p.m. of our natural circadian rhythm. So it's knowing things like that from sleep science and using that with your roster management. There's also biomathematical modeling that takes all of that knowledge and tries to apply it for your larger scheduling. Apologies for that. Then we have got our proactive processes. So this is often when you see maybe your joint health and safety committee or your safety officers going into the field, asking workers how they're feeling about their fatigue, doing different forms of audits. It could be crew level surveys, usually typically, hopefully using a validated survey tool for it. It's performance-based data as well, so it's looking at if there's any dips in productivity at certain times of the day. For planned work versus actual work taking place, is that a factor here as well? And then just using safety databases, so knowing what other sites are experiencing, or that WSIB data says X. We know that typically they say between 65 and 85% of accidents in mining had some aspect of fatigue at play. So it's using that kind of information from other sources inside of your own scheduling and management system. And then reactive processing is any form of post-event investigation. This is fatigue reports, confidential reports from your individual workers coming to you, audits, incidents, and then task analysis as well. So after the event's already taken place, what can we learn from it and apply it for a control in the future? So for predictive processes, the big challenge with these is that operational demands don't allow this to happen on the fly. These are something that has to happen in advance, and because of that, it's going to have limitations to the robustness that it can actually have. It's also based on group averages. So I like to use the example of the BMI scale. So everyone knows the body mass index scale that we use. Everybody hates it because it says that everybody is overweight and everybody is obese, because that's a population-based indicator. It's not based on you as an individual of what you should be based on how much you work out and your individual dynamics of your body. This is the same thing. This is assuming that every single one of us in this room is having the same experience with it being 2 to 3 p.m. right now, which is not the case. It also doesn't take into account different things like workload, the degree of experience I have. The more knowledgeable and skilled I am at my job, the more efficient I can be, the better I can respond to it, which means that some of these predictive processes aren't going to do me any favor. For the proactive processes, a lot of the challenges here are also time consuming. To go out and survey your workforce, not an efficient use of time. You're typically not getting a great return on the number of surveys that you're receiving or the quality of the responses that might be in it. There's also so many factors that are contributing to deviations between planned work and actual work. So you can't always just say that that was related to the operator's fatigue. It could have been to do with any other number of conditions on the job site. Some of the tools also have learning effects. So you might have been to a site before that has you do a performance vigilance test. You go up and there's an iPad there and it has you click and do a memory test or a Stroop color test or some kind of reaction test. Those have a learning component to it where every time you went into that site and did that test, you got better at it. And so your ability to get better at it is masking your ability for it to detect your fatigue. So unfortunately, that has a little bit of a flaw to it. And then it also can't detect the source of your fatigue. So whether I'm coming in and I'm experiencing actual fatigue or sleepiness versus if I'm having an impairment from drug, alcohol, or some other cause. Okay, and then the reactive processes, of course, the real challenge here is that there is no ability to take an accident investigation and test backwards to say, well, was there fatigue? We can embed it inside of how we investigate things. We can look at the time of day. We can include surveys and asking, but it's going to have that recall effect to it, and it's never going to be true data because there's no blood test that can say yes or no, you were impaired by fatigue. Okay, so that was how we identify it. How do we now monitor it? So now we know, and we've established that there is workers on your site that are experiencing fatigue every single day. What can we do to monitor it? Our early foundations of this come from about the 1970s. It was all laboratory-based stuff. It was really just strictly used for clinical studies. We then had our first generation of wearables take place, and this is because our athletes needed them. They needed portable heart rate monitoring systems and different techs that they could wear while they were doing elite level performance. We then had the expansion and development of cognitive fatigue ones. And so this was the first entry point of this is the idea of a portable EEG. So this is basically a system worn on your head to measure your brain waves that then could go outside of a sleep clinic setting. We also developed ocular monitoring systems. So this is the intervention of the camera systems being in cabs of equipment or glasses that are donned to look at blink rates. And then also biomechanical wearables as well are typically around the wrist or the hands to look at positionality on your steering wheel. Since then, these have proliferated. There's over, like I said at the beginning, there's over 40 different ones in the market that are just marketing themselves to the mining industry. That's a big influx of tech and a big influx of equipment that hasn't necessarily been validated for the industry of mining, right? This is a different environment. We've got vibration, we've got noise, we've got extreme heat, extreme cold if we're in the north. We've got factors here that a lot of these techs and products have not been tested under those conditions. So influx there. We've also had the introduction, though, of multimodal systems of, okay, can we take that EEG data and mix that with some biomedical modeling to use the data together? And then lastly, there's been big advancements in probably the last 5 years on making these tinier, more comfortable. So just actually working on the feasibility and the usability of the product because of some early feedback about 10 years ago. So 3 categories of these ones. Performance-based technologies. So these are anything that's going to detect your cognition approximately based on your motor performance. And it's based on the assumption that your motor performance is going to have a decrement once you become fatigued. So typically this would be a vehicle-based monitoring system. So your car might have it even, your lane detection, the advanced warning of a car ahead of you. And then there are body-based systems here as well where you would be actually wearing the device but achieving the same benefit. Then we have our behavioral-based techs. And so this is an observation-based approach where it is not touching the human body. It is inside the cab of the equipment, and it's almost always camera-based. And this is the idea that we're looking for either just the eyes, so perclose systems, so PERCLOS. This is just looking for the rate that we're blinking at, or it could be the category of facial change detection. And this is all based off of taking thousands of pictures of people's faces and looking at the ratio between your eyes to your nose to your upper lip, and your upper lip to your chin. And so by doing that, you can then look at ratios that say, okay, well, I started to nod forward, or I was distracted and I was looking away, or my eyes got slower and lower. And so it's just detecting that variation. And then we have the physiology-based systems. So this is the EEG one that I just mentioned. So this is a brain-based system that's monitoring a change that's happening in the fluctuation of the electrical impulse in your brain. Or we can have a heart rate-based system that is based off of the same thing that your ECG would be doing, your electrocardiogram, or just your simple Fitbit heart rate monitor that you might be wearing. So I wanted to do, there's one slide on each of these just to get a little bit deeper on it. So these performance-based ones, how are they working? They're working based on your body's position in space, their gait patterns, it could be steering behaviors, and it's all based off of inertial sensors that are happening in the piece of equipment itself typically. It's inertial measurement units for it. It could also be an accelerometer being used, headway tracking, laneway tracking, like I said, or deviations from the pathway that you should be on. Body-based ones, these aren't as common, but there are some on the market that you might see or be exposed to at a trade show. And so this is motion tracking based on a physical garment, typically on the wrist, and it's connected to a sensor that's also in the steering wheel and allowing for that detection to take place. The behavior-based ones, so these ones here, there's a couple different foundations of them. There's EOG, there's oculometry, there's pupillatory ones that are just based on different micro levels of monitoring of the eyelid, assuming that your eyes get sleepy once you become tired. Facial detection as well, like I said, it was those geometric patterns that are happening. So it's also looking for things like yawning taking place as an indicator of fatigue status as well. So it's a visual analysis of the operator themselves. And then our physiology ones. So we've got these brainwaves. It's the electroencephalogram, which is a big, fancy, scary word, but it literally just means measuring the electrical impulse of the brain. This one is looking for those fluctuations over time. Heart rate, this is heart rate variability typically, because that's where we're going to see the first effect taking place within your actual heart once you're feeling that fatigue. And then there are some other ones, really not super common for being marketed towards mining, but there are EMG ones that are looking at muscle fatigue that attempt to make correlations back to mental fatigue. Galvanic skin response, temperature, and respiration as well, where they try to look for variations in that could be indicators that your body is becoming tired. These all have a wealth of challenges with them as well, some overcomable, some not. Cameras, big issue here is that this is a lagging indicator. So this is an indicator that I have already fallen asleep, typically, right? Your eyes have to already have been shutting to have the indicator take place and the message be sent or notification happen. So it's at the first sign of fatigue, not at the first measure of fatigue. There's privacy concerns with these as well because they are sometimes, depending on the product, able to monitor other things at the same time. So operator seatbelt use, are they smoking in the cab of the vehicle, cell phone use, whatever it could be. Environmental limitations with these as well. You have to be forward facing. You have to face towards in some degree of periphery of that camera system. So there's a lot of pieces of equipment, auxiliary equipment that this doesn't work in when you have to be operating by looking over your shoulder, or if you're a more mobile operator and you're not in the cab of an equipment, obviously the system is not going to be feasible for you. Precision as well, because of these factors, because of lighting, because of vibration, because of the requirement for calibration, these are prone to false alarms taking place, which can lead to operator or workforce resentment of the product. Wristbands, these have really weak evidence for their ability to predict a fatigue event taking place. Typically, what they have to do is your workforce has to wear a heart rate monitor on their wrist for an entire 48-hour period or 72 hours. They then take that data and use it for predictive modeling, and then anticipate that, okay, based on how rested or unrested you were last night, you're probably going to get fatigued at 4 p.m. today, so we'll do our scheduling to address that, and that's when your break period is going to be. So it's not measuring or monitoring during the day, it's in advance, and it requires your operators and your workforce to want to wear those devices at home. A lot of resistance for these ones, typically from unions, because it does require usually that 24-hour monitoring and data privacy issues. The headbands, the EEG monitors, these can be seen as intrusive because it is donned on the head, so some people find that a little bit challenging. There's some complexity to this because it's microsleep risk doesn't always align with the operator's sensation or understanding of it. So there's a big behavior change component of this product or these products, and so you have to have a learning component that goes with it to understand that situational awareness of yourself. And then this one is the same thing that all have is data privacy issues, right? Because you're monitoring some aspect of the body and you're using it for safety management. There's also some operational concerns that's typically seen with any of these products, which is the idea that, okay, if I give my workforce this product, they're all gonna have a wild level of fatigue, and it's gonna lead to me having to shut down my entire fleet or do something dramatic that affects productivity. Typically, you're seeing, if an entire operation is using these, 1 alert in 22 hours of operation. That's very low. Okay, so getting to the end here, some of the challenges and some of the considerations that you might want to take from this. A lot of the literature and evidence on this views the concept of fatigue as a binary system. Like that continuum I showed you, I'm alert or I'm asleep. Because of how they classify inside of these systems, a lot of them are looking at the occurrence of fatigue, not the transitionary state to becoming fatigued. And so I've done a little figure here that shows you. We have an alert operator. High level of beta waves going on. Typically, most operators, this is 80 to 90% of your day. You're actually in this window here. Then we're transitioning to our fatigue state. We're getting those alpha waves taking place. We're becoming impaired. This is about 10 to 20% of our workday usually. Then we have our eyes open microsleeps, our eyes closed microsleeps. We've slowed down our brain waves even further, and then we have an occurrence of fatigue or an incident take place. So our opportunity to intervene on this, to stop it from happening, is in that yellowed out box there, right? And in order to do that, we have to have a predictive system that's monitoring on the individual level. A camera system is going to operate in that orange zone where you have a visual sign already taking place. So it all comes down to what you're trying to detect from the system when you're choosing it. If you're trying to detect micro sleeps, camera systems are fantastic. If you're trying to detect the transition of alertness, an EEG system or a heart rate system could be more valuable to you. And what we measure matters off of that same point. So all of these systems are just using biopotential, so that's electrical output from something in the human body to make these claims about operator fatigue. They all come from, like we said, foundations in clinical settings. The ECG led to the wearable wrist monitor. The EOG led to the camera system or the glasses. The EEG led to the headband wearable. And the EMG led to the wristwatches that we can use for motion detection. So all of these come from really strong 30, 50-year foundations in clinical research, but their use in health and safety is very different from that. So our heart rate use, this is an indirect measure. We're inferring our level of fatigue based off of our heart rate variability. Our EOG systems, we're inferring our fatigue based on a visual indicator. EEG, we're directly measuring from the brainwave, and then physical fatigue, not applicable in this case because this is physical fatigue and we're talking about cognitive, so I've left that one out. And so on that same note of what we measure matters, the mechanisms of fatigue. So we talked at the beginning, what do we see this as? We see it as better problem solving, better cognitive functioning, better critical thinking. But what's actually happening is occurring inside of your brain. You've got natural resource depletion. So the more intense we're thinking about something, the more mental energy we're expending. We have a consumption of the glucose and the dopamine in our brain, existing in the brain. We also have an accumulation of metabolic byproducts that's happening in the brain. So things like adenosine is building up. We've got altered cognitive functioning or connectivity, This is the idea that your prolonged tasks are delaying the communication that's going on. You've got motivational shifts. And this is a really cool evolutionary component that we have, which is the idea that our brain will actually down-regulate if we're becoming too stressed with a task. So it'll actually create fatigue to slow us down so that we don't feel that degree of stress. And then we can also have inflammatory responses. And so what I wanted to highlight here, all the words in orange, say the brain. So when we look for a system to monitor fatigue, fatigue exists in the brain, we should measure the brain. If we want to talk about our heart and our cardiovascular function, we're not going to talk about the brain anymore, we're going to talk about your heart. But when I want to know about your physical fatigue, we're going to measure your muscles. So the important takeaway that I want to say is measure what you're trying to measure with one of these systems if you choose to integrate it in your site. Closing thoughts, because I got my time warning. You cannot manage what you don't measure. You can have a fatigue risk management system that is fairly robust without having one of these detection technologies. There's other components that you can build up and use, but if you want to actually be able to manage it on an individual level, you have to measure it. We do not want to just detect the occurrence of fatigue. We want to look at the transition to fatigue. There is one direct source of understanding fatigue, and that is the EEG. And fatigue is experienced individually. We cannot look at it at a population level and say that we're all going to experience it the same. So we need to therefore measure and monitor that presence of risk on an individual level. Prevent the incident, don't just record it. This is the idea of using any form of predictive or proactive approach instead of just relying on our reactive systems. And then lastly, a tool is just a tool. It has to be supported by a well-designed system. Any one of these systems will fail if it's not integrated within a fatigue risk management system, but if done well and implemented with correct communication and correct education and good policies that say that there's no penalty to experiencing a fatigue-related incident, if you have that in place, then this tool can be fantastic and can save lives. But without that well-designed system, it's just a tool and it's just a device that's not going to have great compliance to it. Okay, happy to answer questions.
Hang on. How about positional-based testing?
Body and space. So the project that I
No, I
led
just
with
mean
Forex
if
is
it's someone in the
entirely
field,
shift
someone in an
work. So for
office.
4 years, I managed
Do we have
their
data
project.
separated
So
to
it
see
started as a research endeavor
the
where I was
differences?
entirely independent from the company and the product. I was working with Krosh at the time and Dr. Sandra Dorman and Dr. Dom Gagnon. And we came in as scientists to basically study the product in the field. And so that operation is an open pit mine in Mexico, a gold mine. And they were doing a shift cycle that was 10 days, 10 nights, 10 off. So the entire integration with that operation was shift work based. And all of these systems are being tested under that same kind of context. So So you find really interesting things about it. Some of them are assumptions that you would probably already have about where you're going to see the rises and falls based on sleep science. But there's other really unique things that come out of it. For example, that site Thursdays,
Okay.
very big problem.
Thanks,
Thursday.
Dr. Tetzliff.
There
My
was
question
also
would
some
be
windows
is
of
the
time
direct
that were
source
outside of
monitoring,
normal
so
circadian
monitoring the
fluctuations
brain,
that
is
got
there any,
flagged.
can you speak to anybody
There's
using
location
that
tracking in
technology right
almost all of
now?
these systems as well, so then you can look at, okay, where on site you integrate it with your fleet management system. You can also say, well, what type of task were they performing at the time? What can we do to change the lighting in that environment? Or just look at different types of mitigation controls that could be applied, like blue light inside the cab of the vehicle as well. So really interesting to see when you have a 24-hour shift wearing it, you get a lot of really strong data.
Long haulage operations related to mining?
Yeah.
How about positional-based testing?
So body in space or the vehicle?
No, I just mean someone in the field, someone in an office.
Okay.
Do you have data separated to see the differences?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's not a lot of data that uses any of these types of systems on things outside of like haulage and mobile equipment operation. There's very low use in testing that happens in control rooms or that happens in other aspects of the field. So part of my upcoming research plan is to basically test some of these tools, and the EEG one in particular, but test it inside of those contexts so that we can get use cases or look at how we need to better adopt the system for those contexts. Some of the systems will never be used in other ways if it requires like a really heavy in-cab installation for it. But there's other that are those mobile wearables that can transition to other use cases, but there's very little research on it right now. Yeah.
Thanks, Dr. Tetzliff. My question would be is the direct source monitoring, so monitoring the brain.
Yeah.
Is there any, can you speak to anybody using that technology right now?
Yes, so that is the product, that's the one I'm most familiar and comfortable with. So the site at Torex was using EEG monitoring. There are sites all over Canada, all over North America in general, all over Chile, Mexico, Australia, all over South Africa, and a few in Indonesia that are currently using EEG monitoring, mostly in open pit mining and long haulage operations related to mining. But yes, the EEG product has been used for years. That one is a single vendor. There is only one on the market right now that competes in that space. And because of that, it's very easy to track where it's being used currently. Yeah. And I did bring, this was meant to be agnostic in the sense that I didn't mention brand names. I do have one of the EEG monitors here with me, so if anyone wants to be able to see it, handle it, I can show it to you after.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. This is for you. Okay, thank you very much, Emily. That was insightful. I think it's been a bunch of presentations today where I was like, I know a lot about this stuff, and after the presentation, I'm like, I don't know much about this stuff. So it's been impactful for me. That's good. We are going to move on to our next presentation, though. And we have some fine individuals from Ontario Mine Rescue here who are going to make a presentation on emergency response to battery fire. So obviously a very prevalent topic for today. And our presenters are going to be Dan Ruley and Nicholas Schwer from Ontario Mine Rescue. So I'm not done. No, come on up. I feel like chow earlier. Wait, it's not over. Dan is a mine rescue officer overseeing the Southern District, active in the Ontario Mine Rescue Program since 2004. With 18 years of mining experience relating to underground construction, he brings first-hand experience dealing with large format batteries and battery fire investigations. He's also a volunteer firefighter for Southwest Middlesex Fire Department. Nicholas has been active in the Ontario Mine Rescue Program for 14 years, serving as a mine rescue officer for the Kirkland Lake District since 2021. His mining career saw several mines within northeastern Ontario with experience in surface exploration, milling operations, and underground development. He also volunteers as a firefighter with the Black River Matheson Fire Department. So please welcome Dan and Nicholas.
Batteries, right? You know you got a good subject to talk about where just saying the title gets different reactions from people, right? Kind of like the elections we just went through, right? Batteries. Doesn't really matter if you voted for batteries, you didn't vote for batteries, they're here, right? So we'll deal with them. So speaking to response to fires and a proactive approach. So new technology, right, bringing batteries in, it's generally for the good, right? It's making things easier, making things safer, less emissions. There's a lot of major benefits to having batteries coming into our work sites, and we're seeing more and more of them. And we often forget about how much we're bringing it into our day-to-day life. We get comments that, we don't have batteries at our site as the person has a phone ringing in their pocket, right? We've got all kinds of batteries, and it doesn't matter the size or shape, we have to address all of them. Mine rescue response. So what you're looking at is a diesel piece of equipment on fire, and that's the response that we've trained for a long, long time. It's the devil we kind of know, right? We have lots of proven, tried and true techniques, resources, ways that we can apply different suppression agents to address these types of fires. And as we get into the battery side of things, we need to really stop painting batteries with the same brush and saying a battery is a battery. Identifying ahead of time that this is a battery fire is important, but needing to know the type of battery and what its nuances are going to be able to address that in particular battery. So let's start with the mine rescue side of things and how we build up to go and attack a certain situation. So starting with a briefing. Our teams are getting their equipment ready. There's an appointed briefing officer who's gathering as much information as possible. And this varies from incident to incident. Some incidents, we know what's on fire. We've got good information on what's on fire, where it is. Sometimes it's just a source of smoke, right? Either way, that briefing officer needs to be able to gather as much information as possible to paint a picture for the team to be as prepared as possible. From there, depending on the information that BO is getting, they're able to start digging into SDS sheets, emergency vehicle information, anything that starts to narrow down what we're going to do when we get there. And that's obviously dependent on the information they've received at the beginning. This also evolves. The information could come from a team that's already underground. So it started as just a source of smoke, but now the team has gotten there and knows that, oh, the source now is X vehicle or whatever the situation is. From there, it's a risk analysis, and our risk analysis is hand in hand with the objectives of mine rescue. Our first primary objective is always going to be the rescuers themselves and their safety. From there, it's to rescue missing or trapped individuals. The people are the priority. Then it's the emergency, whether it's fire or non-fire, and then it's getting the mine back up to normal operations, right? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a turnkey, the emergency's over, you can go back to normal, but we need to make sure that whoever's going to make it normal is safe to do so, whether that's ventilation, stuff like that. So that hazard risk assessment is trying to follow those objectives and make sure we're aligned with that. Maps and ventilation, getting used to, again, steer the teams. We have a source of smoke, becomes very vague. Well, if they're reporting smoke from here, utilizing the ventilation kind of starts to narrow down. We've got this really big, intimidating mine, but if they're seeing smoke here, it starts to narrow down the potential of where it could be. Equipment needed, again, depending on the information, we can be very specific in saying take this suppression system with you. When we're more on the exploratory side of things, we have what we call our standard, the bare minimum we're going to bring, and then we can adjust it from there. Scene size up. We often look at scene size up as being directly at the scene, and that's obviously a very crucial part of the mission, but that scene size up is continuously happening. From the first report of what's going on, to mid-reports as teams are getting there, to reports even once we're done with the emergency. That scene always has to be looked at as changing. Heat energy, fires are hot, right? So once we start to identify heat potentials, different ways for the teams to attack to keep them out of the heat, right? That always needs to be something that we're looking at. And then agent application. What are we going to put on this fire? Once upon a time, it was just the options were water, and we've advanced through the years with different foam, different dry chemicals, all different types of agents that help to be specific depending on what the source of flame is. And then post-incident operations. So what do we need to do to make it safe? Is it going to be addressing the actual thing that was the emergency? Is it the location the emergency was in? Is there something affected? Were there things that had to be done through the mission somewhere else in the mine to make it safe for our workers to be there? We need to look at all that stuff. Okay. So new technologies, different approach, right? As batteries are coming in or anything is coming into the mine, we need to be looking at what we have to arm our team members with to be able to deal with those situations. And a lot of the scary side, the concern side with the batteries is what's coming off of them when they're on fire. And they're all a little bit different. So we need to make sure that we're giving our personnel the equipment they need to detect that, right? The dragger tubes, kind of the old new technology, it was very popular at a time, kind of became a little bit less popular, but now we're seeing it as an opportunity to really dial in on specific gases at a site, right? If a site brings a particular battery that we're aware when it catches on fire will release a certain gas, that mine can stock those tubes so that we have something in place for that team to detect. Obviously, that goes hand in hand with electric monitoring systems, right? Being able to buy particular sensors or units themselves to detect those gases. And then strip technology. So again, kind of an old new technology, but paper strips are something that when they come in contact with the gas or when you put them into a solution, say the water that you use for the firefighting, will indicate what's in it. Other technologies that we're bringing in to our benefit is the tablet program with Mine Rescue. So putting tablets in the hands of our teams when they go underground is a huge opportunity to share information, right? Utilizing those Wi-Fi connections to be able to send pictures, to show what the team is seeing so that someone can interpret what's going on. When a BO learns that it's a particular battery on fire, they can send the team information that they need. Send them an SDS sheet or send them an emergency response card. A lot of our equipment manufacturers are making these cards for us as responders so that when it's this piece of equipment on fire, this is what you need to do. And we can send that electronically directly to the teams if they're in a location with Wi-Fi. Other technologies that are technologies we've had for a long time are thermal image detection, right? Using thermal imaging cameras. Our captains are, it's just part of the process. It's ingrained in them that when they're near a fire, up comes that thermal imaging camera. Let's get some heat readings. Let's make sure we're putting suppression efforts at the source of heat themselves. The new side of it with batteries is understanding that they don't need to be on fire for them to be the next fire. They just need to get hot. So encouraging our team captains with those cameras to not just focus in on the fire themselves sometimes. If you're in, say, a shop location where you know there's going to be other batteries on other equipment or batteries on the shelf, right? Scanning around to those objects to see if they're feeling those thermal effects. So I've got a couple incidents that I want to review with you. We talk batteries, especially when the heated conversations start at sites with big battery equipment, it kind of becomes the focus. But I spoke to all the batteries sitting on tables around the room right now, right? All the batteries that you have at home in your garage, and the hazards that they pose. So what you're seeing here on the left is the aftermath. This operator, unbeknownst to him, ran over 2 cordless tool batteries that were in the roadway, fell out of a bag. No one fessed up to where they came from. It doesn't really matter, but ran over these batteries. As he recognized that there was a fire, stopped the scoop, hit the fire suppression, thinking it was the scoop on fire. The flames from a little handheld cordless battery were shooting 6 feet high, the height of his piece of equipment. Got out, used the extinguisher off of the scoop, ran to other equipment. It was at the end of the shift, so there was equipment parked nearby, dumped 4 fire extinguishers on the battery fire with no effect. Called for stench, emergency procedures implemented, mine rescue team goes down, and what they found was fire out. You can see the pieces on the left. That's all that's left from the little cells that were inside that cordless tool battery. The next day in the investigation, when they go to move the scoop, that's when they discovered the second battery. And they were very fortunate that the tire was parked completely on top of that battery, smothering out oxygen and not allowing it to have the full burst of flame, but still got hot enough to melt through the retread of a scoop tire, right? And that's that little battery that is plugged in behind wickets, in offices, all over the place. Another incident kind of recognizes where we are in the era of batteries, right? We've had them, it feels like a very new subject, but we've had them for so long that we've used them up. We have sites now that have had this technology in their equipment long enough that they've got old batteries, batteries that have run their cycle and are no good anymore. This is a picture of what we'll call a boneyard, where this mine was storing batteries that were out of operation now, right? These batteries are exposed to the elements. It also highlights another challenge for us in that, and as a miner, I'll say this, but we're really good at breaking stuff. So our approach is always to beef stuff up, to bomb-proof stuff, right? The mechanics only deal with something broken once and they say, I'll fix this. And we put thicker and thicker steel boxes around things, and we seal things up more. What happened here was stranded energy, the little bit of energy left in that battery when it was put on surface and then exposed to elements, got snowed on, got rained on, got heated up. Being that it was such a sealed box, it created its own greenhouse environment inside this battery. And on a really, really hot day, the moisture locked in was finally enough to connect some contacts, cause a thermal event, and it erupted into flame. Right? The last incident I'm going to talk about was a lead acid battery. So again, often when we're having these conversations and labeling batteries as batteries, we also tend to say, but the lead acid ones, no big deal. We've had them forever. They're in all the vehicles that are in the parking lot outside, the old school lead acid battery. This event here, smoke was detected underground. A mine rescue team went. When they got there, they found this piece of equipment. The gases had built up inside that equipment to the point where it had blown the compartment doors up off of the battery. They recognized that the batteries were smoking, but this was one of the few times where we got to get there before it was on fire. A second mine rescue team was created that had an electrician on the team, and by having that person there that had experience with batteries, they were able to get there, disconnect the batteries enough to make it safe, and then that piece of equipment was transported to surface. Even with all the battery connections disconnected properly, That piece of equipment stored in the middle of nowhere, for 2 weeks it smoked and smoldered. So that it highlights the importance of us being proactive through all the mining side of things, not just in the emergency of trying to identify these things before they get to the full-blown fire.
Thank you, Nick. So for the second half of our presentation, I want to give you more of a simple breakdown of some of the main causes of battery fires in the underground environment. Some of these are going to be root causes, others are, excuse me, based upon lack of risk assessment, initial research when introducing these new technologies into our mines. So, starting off, external damage, misuse, inadequate maintenance. As Nick highlighted in his presentation, mining is tough on equipment. You know, we need to kind of remain vigilant, especially if we're recording and tracking maintenance issues, damage, things of that nature. Overcharging, charging cycles outside of OEM original manufacturer's recommendations, defects or internal short circuits leading to thermal runaway, potential exothermic reaction from inside the battery, external heating from the vehicle itself, fire, and other heat sources. Malfunctioning charging systems, smart cards, ground fault redundancies, and/or cooling systems. And to kind of go back to what Nick was talking about, the boneyard, environmental, humidity, and possible water ingress. So, we've heard the term, and I'm sure everybody has heard it here, the term thermal runaway. What is it? I'm going to read a passage I found on the internet while we were doing our research for this presentation. So it kind of goes like this. Thermal runaway begins when heat generated within a battery exceeds the amount of heat that is dissipated to its surroundings. If the cause of excessive heat creation is not remedied, the condition will worsen. Internal battery temperature will continue to rise, causing battery current to rise, creating a domino effect. The rise in temperature in a single battery will begin to affect other batteries in close proximity, and the pattern will continue, thus the term runaway. So as you can see by the graphic, this was kind of a description taken from your regular, anybody have an e-bike or scooter containing, a smaller size battery, but with these cells. So from the picture you can see, when we talk about, recall our causes, could be anything from external heat sources, damaged batteries, impingement from foreign objects, or just internal shorts or defects, creating a cell that's now beginning to heat up and degrade from the inside. As you can see by the picture, that cell, as it continues to heat up, is going to transfer heat to the cells around it, and now that's that domino effect that can lead to a fire. If thermal runaway is left uncontrolled, regardless of the initiation event, the damage or whatever has happened to the battery, these fires remain totally unpredictable and can escalate into violent heat and energy dissipation. And now we have an underground fire emergency. Ontario Mine Rescue's response typically initiation of the mine rescue response and emergency procedures on the mine site. Mine rescue teams brief, enter the mine to assess and mitigate the fire emergency. Assessment of fire to determine offensive or defensive suppression tactics. So at that point, the teams has to determine, using their priorities, that if they can get to close to that fire, are they downwind of the heat, smoke, contamination? They may have to take up a defensive position. This may include letting the fire burn itself out or sealing off the entire area. Teams retreating to surface for decontamination of personnel and equipment, and ongoing remediation of the fire scene and exhaust routes to eliminate toxic contaminants from the workplace. So as teams are responding, we've identified some hazards to our personnel. And as Nick pointed out in one of his incidents, that's stranded energy, electrical hazards from battery modules, high voltage outputs, and or charging circuits. Attempted cooling efforts may expose teams to that high voltage, with water being the primary conductor. And if you can imagine being underground, starting to flow water onto a fire, that water is eventually going to build up if it doesn't run away. And pretty soon our team is standing in water. Some instances, water and or foam will increase the intensity of the fire with possible explosive hazards. It depends on the type of battery it is, what we're receiving as far as information from the SDS sheets. Contact with hazardous combustible electrolyte. Mine rescue teams not equipped with full structured PPE, i.e. bunker gear. Typically, we've all seen firefighter videos on the internet. They're wearing full structure bunker pants, coats. They're well protected from heat and or projectiles. Our personnel heading underground are generally outfitted with, less heat collecting garments, coveralls, flame retardant material, gloves, and breathing apparatus. Ventilation limitations within the confined underground environment. Heat, smoke, hazardous gases present in the downstream flows or trapped in poorly vented areas. Batteries in close proximity of other batteries or battery electric vehicles, conveyors, mining equipment, electrical, and other mine infrastructure and combustible materials. In emergency response, we call those fuel loads. So if we have an active fire, our teams are going to start to begin to assess what's close by, and in many cases, those become additional hazards for the team to keep their head on a swivel. Batteries located in remote or expansive mining locations, increasing response times. So if we go back and we think about why we are beginning to bring batteries underground in our profession, there's several advantages. We're not running diesel equipment, our air quality is better, and it allows us to travel further and get farther away from our shaft, which is our bottleneck. And, but if we have to respond to a fire, our teams are now traveling farther. Other respiratory contact, skin hazards, hydrogen fluoride, sodium chloride, other airborne contaminants, metallics, oxides of carbon, nickel, lithium, copper, cobalt, battery steam, sulfuric acid. When we encounter battery fires, there's absolutely a almost deadly cocktail that's coming off of them. Vehicle battery locations and that bomb-proof encasement that Nick was talking about definitely can hinder our teams from applying water or other suppression agents. And damaged cooling systems. So we are seeing, or the industry is seeing, battery equipment coming underground with its own cooling systems, which is a great idea. It's nothing new. However, if those systems become damaged or compromised during a fire, they almost act as now they are an insulator. And we are still learning. So I want to shed a little light on an incident that is making its way through many emergency service agencies throughout North America. Surprise, Arizona, April 19th, 2019. The Surprise, Arizona Fire Department responded to a possible structure fire. And in that structure fire, as they arrived on scene, they were met with what was typically a battery storage unit, state-of-the-art, had all the bells and whistles. They were notified before getting there, and when they arrived, they just noticed some smoke. They could tell when they monitored it that it had accumulated a bunch of heat, but was definitely off-gassing from the inside. So when I say state-of-the-art, the facility had all the latest bells and whistles, temperature monitoring, fire suppression, fire suppression in the form of actual agent inside and fire doors that completely confined the structure. So not preparing to go in right away, but more or less set back. There was no human life involved at that point. It was just a backup, basically a backup power system. An explosion occurred due to the buildup of flammable gases in the confined area. So what had happened was the fire team, along with a hazmat team that was called, arrived on scene. They made entry. The only reason they made entry is because the monitoring controls were now showing a decrease in temperature, decrease in the actual amount of smoke coming out of the unit, and they had decided at that point that there was a reduced risk. And they wanted to make entry and start remedying that fire. No smoke and flames were visible. So what was different? The early detection protocols, controls showed a reduced risk. Oh, I'm going backwards here. Oh. I need to back up. There we go. So the investigation showed that traditional practices such as the temperature monitoring, the smoke alarms, automatic suppression, the space containment had allowed flammable gases to build up within the space. And as they made entry, opened it up, definitely a reduced temperature on the within the actual unit. And as they made entry, the resulting air-fuel mixture resulted in an explosion, which critically injured 4 firefighters. So with that being said, this was possibly an unexpected result from this normal, everyday response to a structure fire that was showing no signs of getting any worse. In 2020, the Swiss government Tunnel Research Working Group conducted a study of risk minimization of electric vehicle fires in underground traffic structures. So if you do a Google search on battery electric vehicle fires underground, you're not going to come up with much. There's not a lot of research there. So we do look to the other industries for that research. Fire service, there's certain governments that are finally putting out some decent research. And here's what they come up with in the Swiss study. Following a battery electric fire in an underground parking garages is what they were aiming at. Fire soot, fire suppression, water, and agents remain untreated and leave behind a potentially contaminated public space or work area. So that's something to think about moving forward. Decontamination of responding personnel, mine rescue equipment are now becoming a common practice. And I'll take a quote from that as we were reading it. I'll take a quote from that and it does kind of point a finger at the mining industry and us in general, due to the few incidents that have occurred as of now. Practical experience in handling BEV fires in underground infrastructures has not yet had a chance to broadly mature. So what can we do as mining professionals? Being proactive in the workplace, we can learn. We can recognize the signs of thermal runaway, due diligence on our reporting of maintenance issues, avoid infrastructure design that would enable increased exposures to other batteries, fuel loads, or blockage of evacuation routes to safe areas. And I'll put the words risk assessment. We are really good at doing risk assessments, but are we doing them in the right places and at the right time? One that I'm passionate about, sharing near misses can save lives. Gathering that information, the 3 incidences that Nick had talked about or had discussed with the crowd here, they were picked on purpose. You could almost consider those near misses. We look at those as more, hey, we've had a chance to decrease the risk of that fire happening before it gets into a violent, raging fire. Timely removal of damaged and decommissioned batteries to designated safe areas
From the
on
outside,
surface.
it would be very
And again, I
difficult.
put that word risk assessment there. You know, is it good enough just to bring them to surface and pile them up? Or, you know, put them in a
And tracing it that way to be able to get
structure.
SDSs.
You know, we need to be smart about that and make sure that A, they are properly decommissioned, meaning we're getting rid of that stranded energy, and B, making sure that they're spaced apart from surface fuel loads. Currently, the mining industry is changing. We know that. Vigilance and being proactive against battery fires can reduce the risk of battery fire emergencies, reduce the risk of emergency responders who answer that call. Thank you very much.
We do have a few minutes for questions and answers. If there are a couple, looks like we might have one over there.
Does the scope of a battery electric fire affect the self-rescuers the same as a diesel fire? Diesel equipment, is it worse or similar?
It's very, very specific to the battery itself. So that'd be something that you'd have to look. Did everybody hear the question? Yeah. So yeah, you'd have to look at the SDS to see what the specific battery you have in mind is releasing.
Stuff up on the screen looks pretty nasty.
Most of it looks very nasty, yeah. from the outside, it would be very difficult. It would have to be done in the research process ahead of time to be able to say what type of battery that is. That's often where we're going to the spec sheets of the equipment and tracing it that way to be able to get those proper SDSs. There's certain manufacturers out there that have made the emergency response cards. Makes it nice. It's almost like ordering a chemical and it comes with the SDS. It's to get those, when those batteries show up to site, they've got that emergency contact card. Right on.
Okay, thank you to Dan and Nick. That was great. I think most of the discussions here the last couple days have been on kind of the left-hand side of the old risk bow tie on prevention. Not all, but the right-hand side on minimizing damage afterwards is very critically important. So thank you for that. So with that, this is bringing an end to the conference and 2 fabulous days of learning, networking, sharing. It's been fantastic. Would like to take one last reminder to please complete the survey on the feedback. There's a QR code on your table, or you will also get an emailed copy. But the feedback's essential to just keep improving this this great event. One last time, I'd like to thank all of our sponsors, all the speakers for today and yesterday, and our sponsors as well. So Sophie, Redpath, Safe Contractor, AJ Stone, Provix, DMC Mining Services, Electrical Safety Authority, KGHM, and Valley Base Metals. Without that support, this event would not be possible. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't give a big round of applause to the staff at Workplace Safety North who puts this together. I'd like to invite them up to the stage, actually, please. I can't even imagine the amount of planning and dedication that goes into this, and we are all the beneficiaries of that. So thank you very much to everybody, and I think one quick photo op. Tiana, do you want to get in the picture? No, okay. I'm gonna get out of the way though. So as we close out, I think a bit of a call to action or a bit of a challenge to everybody in the room here. We have a very, very, very small percentage of the Ontario and Canadian mining industry in this room today, right? So I would strongly encourage you and your co-workers to get together following this and think about, you know, what's our biggest takeaways from here? What have we learned? And what do we need to implement? Because it would be an absolute shame if all this sharing and knowledge kind of stopped at these doors here, right? So really, let's do that. Let's focus on the face, right? I think that's an important thing. What is going to impact the people who are at the highest risks? What's going to prevent fatalities and critical injuries? And I would feel very confident that reach out to any of the speakers, any of the presenters over these last couple of days, and they're going to share their insights with you, because I think that's what the mining industry does best, is share what's going well. Some of us might compete for work and people and all that stuff, but when it comes to the overall health and safety of the people in the industry, we're very, very open to it. I think that's a strength of our industry. So I'd like to thank everybody again for attending the 27th annual Mining Health and Safety Conference. Travel home safely and look forward to seeing everybody next year. So thank you very much.
And one last thing, for real, the last thing. How do we feel our MC did for us this year? Should we bring him back again next year? Should we pay him twice as much as we did this year?
I'm already getting called Steve Banting. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much, and thank you all. And again, we really appreciate it. Our team will be hanging around if you have any questions for us. Pleasant travels home. Look forward to seeing you again next year. Thank you.